Welcome back to Beyond the Headline, everyone. I am ecstatic that you're with us on the show today and very honored to be here with the Executive Director at Box.org, Bryan Breckenridge. Bryan, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Glad to be on the show.
First, congratulations on a spectacular 2 years of Box.org and your support of 5,000 nonprofits like United Nations Foundation, Kiva, and Charity Water.
Yeah, ecstatic. Some amazing organizations doing amazing work. Some giants in the industry are working with us, and we're completely grateful for it.
Before we really dive in, can you give us an introduction for those who don't know about Box.org and how you guys are empowering the nonprofits?
Absolutely. So Box as a company has been around coming on 11 years and certainly has met the needs of tens of thousands of commercial enterprises. About 2 years ago, the organization finally brought to fruition an initiative that would also be inclusive of nonprofit industry. And so from 2 years ago through today, we've been serving nonprofits in three primary ways. And that's with our technology and with the time and treasure of our teams around the world, our employees, and then with our business practices and partnerships, as well, and investments as a company. So for the last 2 years, we've really been just bringing those three focus areas into formal fruition. And like you said, serving lots of great organizations with it.
Can you share an example of Box.org in action for one of your partners?
Absolutely. So we talk a lot about holistic partnerships or three-pillar partnerships is a catchphrase around here, just in that they go across those three-pillar focus areas. One example of that would be our focus in crisis response innovation. As more and more natural disasters happen, as more and more crises arise around the world, we have realized that a lot of our partners that provide services and are implementing in that area are also realizing that if they digitize some of the technology associated with crisis response, they can have a more direct impact or drive efficiency. And so we've created this notion of crisis innovation, or crisis response innovation, as a three-pillar initiative, meaning there are organizations like Team Rubicon who are responding 30 or 40 times a year to these disasters that occur in the world, and they're using our technology at a dramatic discount to mobilize many hundreds of volunteers and staff members to go on those responses. But what gets more exciting about that now is that for the last couple of years, they've been using the technology, which we're helping them optimize. But now you've got Boxers, or our employees, what we call Boxers, raising a hand in the volunteering area and even in the employee contribution or the employee giving area to support Team Rubicon and their peers in this space. And then institutionally, we're creating some good partnerships with the communities that support this niche as well, and matching some gifts on funds that we've built that the outside world can also contribute to, that in turn funnels back to these innovators in this space. So again, there's like three areas of focus for us, and Team Rubicon and some of their peers in the crisis response domain are just a textbook holistic thread that goes across all of our work, as one example.
I'm thrilled that's the one you shared, because I had seen that video a while back when I first interviewed Karen, as you and I were discussing before. And one of the main things that I took away from it that, you wouldn't often think of is in those situations, technology like Box can be life or death changing. I mean, like if you can't communicate, you're at a loss.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, as I've learned more about the space, the capacity that they build in many cases is staff, but it's also all these external parties, volunteers, local governments, all of the emergency response organizations in an area, regional, local, or national or global. And there's just so much collaboration. I mean, and so many assets that fly around, be they maps or manifests of the operating picture that everybody's contributing to in one way or another. There's all kinds of vendors that get flown in, right? There's a lot of materials and resources that are being moved around. And so the location of those and frankly, meeting the supply and demand equation properly does require technology. And it's also an area where bandwidth can be austere. I mean, the DePaul earthquakes did not occur, in the middle of the most bandwidth-rich areas. And so that, the mix of not only collaborating for these organizations to save lives and kind of reinstate a peaceful operating picture in mobilization and in execution and in kind of like the The demobilization phase all requires a lot of collaboration with external and internal collaborators, and frankly, with and without internet. So it's a very, very complex scenario to solve for. And most organizations approach it in a slightly different way because it's also going to be affected by where in the world the disaster hits. So it's a bold thing, I think, to take on, but we did see a real need for innovation in this space, and are starting to see some real leaders rise up in this space, and we're excited to support them.
And it's incredible to listen in to some of your partners as they share their stories and how the technology's impacted them.
Yeah, I wish I could spend all day, every day collecting those stories. I often get busy with all the other fun things that go into an initiative like this and running it. But man, I lately I've committed. We had some great graduate of School of Business students from Stanford supporting the program, and they did a handful of interviews, and I just can't wait to dig back into the detail of all of those interviews. It is very exciting. It is what keeps a lot of our employees and our community attached to this initiative is those stories. It's the whole reason we're in it.
And I'd love to touch on the Boxers for a little bit. Giving is a huge part of your culture, and you connect your team with a lot of opportunities to sync up with Box.org organizations. And there was a recent trip to Cambodia. You guys just had a great post on the blog. Can you tell us a little bit about life at Box in that respect?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the critical thing that I think you can do for any group of professionals in today's workplace is be bold enough to create a safe place for them to solve problems, or do your best to expose some of the challenges or the impact barriers that organizations are facing to your employees. And so what we've done, as much as we're building some, call it, more formulaic structure for employees to access volunteering by way of portals or make gifts more efficiently, or all those infrastructural things, one thing that we've mainly done is expose Boxers in a strategic way to problems in the world, right? So to your point, in Cambodia, there was this notion of that educational institution that we were supporting, building a curriculum and bringing some technology to that curriculum to help that curriculum actually be scalable and stay in place and serve many hundreds and in time many thousands more citizens in that part of Cambodia. So the notion was, I was able to, as Box.org, create a container and mobilize their need for curriculum and their need to access that, with a digital set of tools. But I mainly just brought the problem to light and let, these amazing Box employees, with help from great facilitation from Team for Tech and a local organization, solve those problems. If that makes sense, it's kind of creating a canvas instead of a paint by number. You know what I mean? For employees that I think gets our Box population so enthused, and that notion of problem solving and doing everything, and helping people do things bigger and better is just a big mantra around here. We call this notion 10x. Not different in many Silicon Valley companies that are trying to do everything in a bigger, more exciting way. But I definitely have seen projects like the Cambodia project start to really take hold, and people get excited about problem solving and the real work that happened over there.
I know that's something you guys are very focused on right now too, as you get into year 3 and Box.org is growing up. What are some of the plans you guys have?
Well, the plan really for me is to make certain we're elevating the strategic innovation on the technology first and foremost. So Box itself natively is very much a horizontal technology that helps an organization, in a more generic sense, better collaborate, and manage its content, its information. But more and more, it's starting to get mobilized into more in-depth use case areas. So can Box as a technology better serve crisis responders? Or even more on a departmental level, can the platform do a better job specifically supporting nonprofits at generating more capacity or income? Meaning, can we, using the technology in a more formulaic way, help organizations raise more money to do their work in a better way, in a bigger way? And so in that first focus area, or the first pillar, we really want to help mobilize more innovation beyond just the horizontal value that Box does provide these thousands of organizations. In the employee engagement piece, we want to evolve the work more toward enabling technology fluency and technology capacity for nonprofits, specifically in the content or modern content management area. And so as our technology evolves more and more, we want the programs providing pro bono support and volunteering to also evolve with the technology. As it becomes more sophisticated, as it starts to meet those use cases for nonprofits, we want smart boxers that are passionate about the technology to share it with organizations who may not be able to access all that expertise, on their own with the budgets they have, doing the important work that they do. And then third, we more and more want to define more, what is our way of institutionally supporting Box.org and folding it into our existing practices that scale. So we recently created a program called Boxer Referrals for Good. And so when a Box employee refers one of their friends or colleagues and they get hired, instead of just providing a bonus check, a spot bonus to the employee for making the referral, we provide $500 worth of credits for that employee to donate to causes of their choice. And so, right, if we do hundreds of those, when Box goes back into an exciting acceleration mode as a business, and we're referring lots more colleagues, that in turn means a lot more giving. So the more we can institutionally connect doing good with our practices that scale, so can the capacity building or the fundraising or the volunteering also scale, with the business. And I think that's when you get that, as my friend Jed Emerson calls, new physics for an organization. You don't have good over here and the business over here, both scaling. It's when they're woven together that you create this new physics, this new blended value, new innovation, new impact.
I'm so happy that you brought that up, because one of the main questions I was excited to chat with you about today is, how has giving strengthened your culture at Box?
I think we're just scratching the surface, right? Because we're not in a position to significantly match gifts or make massive investments in the sector, financially. So it's a little bit tougher for us sometimes to teach by doing in this area, just in that we're really just starting to mobilize the resources needed to be a bigger investor in the nonprofit world. However, we've been so strategic and scrappy about the investments that we have made that, as one example, with this crisis response or crisis responder innovation work, for us to match Boxers donations that are being directed to organizations that do that innovation work, that then again ties in that volunteering and ties in those technology elements, all of it becomes more thematic and becomes simpler. And so suddenly somebody is, raising their hand to support doing a training with Team Rubicon or something like that. They're going to realize we also were finding ways to financially contribute to their organization. So those two are connected. So I think right now we're trying to do more connecting, right? Just like we tee up a problem for Box.org and create a container for Boxers to come in and solve those issues. I humbly say we're still very much in beginner mind. We're in the very early phases of understanding what kinds of problems Boxers would also want to apply financial resources to, and not just technology and volunteering. So our ears are much bigger than our mouths in this area, but I definitely get at least an email a week from somebody in Box saying, "Man, so glad you've teed up some of this stuff for us. It makes me really proud to work here and really proud to get involved."
I think it says so much about your team and the commitment. I mean, even to hear you say, with all that you guys have already done, we're just starting and there's so much more that we want to do. It sets an example for other companies. And you shared a really important insight, I felt, in a past talk, saying that, it doesn't matter what you do to give back. Find what's meaningful to your organization, where you can contribute, and do that. What advice do you have for other companies? You have 2 decades of experience here at LinkedIn, at Salesforce, to institute a program like Box.org, just their own version.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things apply. To continue to keep the shared value or the blended value in play, you have to anchor or root a lot of the philanthropic integration into your core competency. So if you're amazing at optimizing something in the supply chain, probably best to understand the problems that the social impact world are trying to solve in the supply chain domain. And I say that for a couple of reasons. One, the organization is going to be quicker to capitalize your integrated philanthropic efforts if the philanthropic work you're doing is closely associated with your organization's gifts and competencies and skill sets and partnership ecosystems and all that good stuff. So that's always a really key piece of advice. In that, again, that helps people that have jobs like mine further justify the building of capacity and resources internally to then tee up these problems to solve for the employee base. So that's the notion of staying close to your core competency. But I think what you can't also then do is too early or too quickly abandon what really become the gateway for employees to really understand the impact they can have, which is meeting them where they are, meeting them where their passions are. So I know at LinkedIn, we were just absolutely hell-bent to keep philanthropy as employee-led as possible, and saw all this incredible creativity happen where sales leaders were like arresting the call centers for 2 hours a month to call donors of nonprofits that they'd voted that they wanted to support. So literally calling donor lists instead of, for those 2 hours, calling into their customer base, against their commercial goals and interests. And so I would say keep it close to your competencies, your agenda for philanthropic integration, but also meet the employees where they are. And if they're really passionate about certain things, do all you can to facilitate that, even if most of your resources are going to be behind the signature programs that are more closely linked with what you do. And then last but not least, I would say, think about all the places that your organization will and can scale and the processes associated. There's hundreds of creative ways to tie philanthropy into your organization's kind of like top 5 objectives or all the hundreds of objectives that spin out from under those departmentally. Maybe the most tactical example of that would be if you have as a company, if you're 5 employees or 50,000 employees, kind of a business goals structure that ladder up to the objectives of the organization and then again ladder down. Find ways of infusing philanthropic integration into those existing business planning structures. So if you have goals and tactics and measurements and things that you're trying to accomplish as a company, why not at the bottom of that just add one more line item to say, and what could we also do with our business this quarter or our department or our team or myself to also generate social impact, as well as financial and business impact. And if you just, again, create the container, not hyper prescribe what they do, but just challenge them to be creative. Maybe it's hold a fundraiser, maybe it's do networking, maybe it's volunteer, maybe it's, have at a department, that department match gifts from that department, for organizations they want to contribute to, whatever it is. So those, I hope, are 3 things, including one tactical tip at the end that would benefit people.
It's spot on, and everyone listening in can really apply that, which always makes it so helpful. So, someone has a roadmap of, hey, let's take this in. As you reflect, Bryan, on your time at LinkedIn and Salesforce, how do you feel like those past experiences helped you scale Box.org faster?
Well, I definitely, I think that what those organizations taught me is that if you do have a technology that can be inclusive or that can generate value, whether that's managing structured data like the Salesforce platform provides, or whether it's connecting talent, with where that talent is needed, like the LinkedIn network provided, was that kind of the synapse of all those resources and the ability to chart a course across those. I got passionate about both of those, technology stacks or ecosystems, and I started to have that same zest for the product, like just understanding wow, what nonprofit doesn't have their content and the most urgent things they're managing in 50 different systems in 50 different places, most of which are insecure, most of which are unsearchable. And so I just started to get passionate, even though it's really content management, which itself isn't necessarily the world's most sexy thing. I got very passionate about it because I realized that everything that people are doing, whether it's program side of nonprofit or fundraising side or admin side, there's just a lot of files and videos and spreadsheets and Word documents and PowerPoint presentations. They arrive by the thousands on a weekly basis in a good-sized organization. So I got passionate about the platform, and that's when I knew that Box.org would really go somewhere because I understand how nonprofits operate, and now I really understand this technology. And I think for them to be closer together, I'm personally passionate about. And that starts to then, I think, plant a lot of seeds for hundreds of other Box employees to get similarly passionate about that intersection. And then you have a forest, instead of a flower bed before you know it.
As you mentioned nonprofits too, in your work with them the last few decades, have you observed any practices or values that they have that for-profit companies traditionally don't, that really propel them forward, that you've taken and applied to your teams?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, part of that is just being very mission driven and having that mission also be something that that is inclusive of purpose. Sometimes that thing that's a little harder to track and measure, in highly tangible ways. Luckily, purpose and operating with that is starting to also be proven to have a positive impact on performance. But I think that the nonprofit sector is obviously incredibly mission driven. And if you can bring that purpose rooted operating mentality to a commercial enterprise, as most great commercial enterprises do, they bring that sense of purpose. They bring a texture to their culture that has people put in that extra hour, or put in those extra miles, or take that extra trip to see that client or whatever it might be. And so I really feel like the nonprofit sector, where whether you're somebody that's in a janitorial role or an executive director role, you're likely at some level passionate about the work they do, right? And it's more than just your brain that's involved in that work. It's probably like your heart and your whole person. And so that to me, it's a really exciting thing. You go into a nonprofit, it's pretty common for everybody in that organization to care about their mission. You walk into lots of commercial enterprises, and maybe a lot of people are excited about the company growing or excited about an IPO or something, but it may not be tapping into their full potential in quite the same way that mission-driven organizations are. But then on the flip side, right, some of the economic models form a barrier for mission-driven organizations to scale and repeat practices and invest in infrastructure and employees and so on that commercial sector is very good at. So that's why I'm always excited about the untapped potential for commercial, especially when those commercial enterprises are compassionate in some way or tapping into people's deeper purpose.
I'd love to touch on the purpose for just a moment. Everything I've read about you, Bryan, highlights how positive you are. I am very big on positivity. When I was in 8th grade, my email was positivity is everything, and everyone thought I was a little weird. Why is positivity such an important part of your life and work and your daily, tasks and responsibilities at Box?
Yeah, I think that there's this cycle that happens if you're rooted in your authenticity, if you're rooted in who you really know you are and what your contribution can be, and you're not allowing your mind's negativity bias to stop a lot of that potential, then what you do is you get more belief in yourself and your work, and that in turn drives the energy that you can apply to it. And as that energy is applied, especially if it's a balanced, authentic energy, elevates, so can then your belief in self. So there's this interesting thing that happens, like you believe in Box.org, and employees start to get involved and nonprofits start to succeed with it. Then you get more energetic to do it. And then you find yourself at midnight, just like, pounding away on something exciting that you're doing for it, to in turn, because you can't wait for the next morning to happen when you can reveal that to your team or to the world. And so I think if you are positive and you're doing it in a way that is rooted in your true authenticity, meaning it really is meant to be part of your contribution on this planet, or your whole contribution really, then you're going to be more energized, and that energy drives you back into that belief, and that cycle is tough to break. And I think in part, life it's so hard so often. Like there's so much about it that's hard, be it financially or personally or psychologically or professionally or whatever it is. There's roadblocks everywhere. And you can't ignore them, but you also don't have to let them define who you're going to be when you show up. You are not your barriers. You are not your fears, right? You are much bigger than that. And I don't know, I caught on to that back when I was about 19 or 20, and I haven't fully looked back yet from that.
I love that, and it's inspiring to hear a leader share that who's, always imparting that to your team. You can see it come alive with everything at Box and Box.org. 2 more questions for you that I'd love to touch on before we go. Have there been any aha moments for you over the last 2 decades in your work?
Aha moments may have been when I realized one thing. I was traveling in El Salvador with a large nonprofit to their work in the field, and it really connected what had been, years of work with Salesforce platform and then years of work applying the LinkedIn platform. And this was during the LinkedIn chapter. And it was very obvious to me, like in that Jeep, literally 100 miles from, proper like electricity and cables and so on. And I realized like the urgency with which applying this notion of globalization to global impact and like really bridging that gap. And for me, it happened to be technology was the way with which we could get more resources where it was needed. But it was just an aha moment, bouncing around in that Jeep and getting out of the Jeep and going into villages and spending time there in the context of understanding, wait, like I really need to make sure that Silicon Valley has an authentic and credible seat at this table and is helping, right, increase capacity for organizations who understand this work and can keep the humanitarian or the nonprofit world current and have it not go away. And so I think we have a lot to share, both with our technology, both in some of our operating models and other things. We have a lot to teach each other. So that was an aha moment. Maybe another aha moment would be just recently a Box employee was walking down the hall with somebody else that I could tell was 15 or 20 or 30 years older than them, probably 20 or 30 based on what I'm about to say, but it was their parent. And I walked up to say hello, and the parent had a lot of the parent just immediately started gushing about how excited that they were for their daughter to be involved in Box.org. And I was just like, wow, I mean, I'm a parent too, I have a 10-year-old at home, but it was fascinating to be with a fellow adult Box employee and have the parent so excited, that their kid, my peer, is involved in this work. It was fascinating, and it was very rewarding, and it was kind of like, okay, yes, need to keep doing this, need to stay focused. Those one-off stories are worth fighting for.
Well, I think everything you do is worth fighting for, and I'm so excited to see what this following year has in store for you, for the team, for all the incredible nonprofits you're working with. My last question for you is one of my favorites, Bryan. If you could give everyone a fortune cookie with your favorite saying on it, what would you write inside?
Wow, favorite saying. Give me just a moment on that one. There may actually be a few seconds of silence here as I really try and dig deep on this one. And maybe the phrase is just 2 words. It's fully be.
Wow, that one hit me. Okay. That is a very, very good one. And I think an important reminder for literally just to say that throughout the day to yourself.
That's right. Like everything you do, like, wow, did I really appreciate that meal? Did I really appreciate that conversation? Did I really give my all? And if you're doing that, then doors open all over the place. It's great.
I can't thank you enough for that. I can't thank you enough for this conversation. What's the best way, Bryan, for everyone on 2 levels? One, to just learn more about Box.org. And then if you're a nonprofit interested in applying and working with you guys, how can they do that?
Yeah, the absolute best thing to do is just go out to Box.org. And there's lots of resources, places to sign up for the donation that we offer to nonprofits that are eligible around the world. And we do our best to keep updating that environment. If you're somebody that's listening to this program and you're with a nonprofit that's already using Box as a technology, certainly spend time at one other website, which is community.box.com/nonprofit, and that's where our community is. And so feel free to step in there and interact with your peers or ask us questions or whatever it may be. So that's where we create community for this ever-growing community of Box.org.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Of course. It's been a pleasure.